pressure corrupts our actions, and then power isolates us from the effect of those actions on other people.
Welcome to the STEM Career Coach, hosted by Donnie Maclary. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, this is your guide to growing in STEM.
Hello, everyone. In today's episode of the STEM Career Coach, I am very excited to welcome Sabina Nawaz for her to share some of her experience and share some of the bits and pieces about her new book that is coming. Welcome, Sabina.
Thank you so much, Donnie. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and share a bit about your story?
Well, I started my career, like much of your audience, I imagine, in STEM with degrees in computer science, electronics, and computer systems engineering, and worked in computer software for over 9 years at Microsoft, and then switched careers to head up Microsoft's executive and management and leadership development. So I was responsible for the development of over 11,000 managers and 1,000 executives in the company. But over the past 20 years, I've been working for myself, and I work one-on-one with CEOs across the globe in over 20 countries and do leadership programs, keynote speeches, write for Harvard Business Review, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and so on. But
Wow.
at the end of the day, Donnie, if you were to ask me one thing of what am I really paid to do, I'm paid to raise people's heart rates. What I mean by that is leadership is not rocket science. Most people actually instinctively do a really good job of knowing what leadership is about. It's another thing to act on leadership because that requires a lot of courage, tremendous courage. And courage happens when our heart is pumping hard and we take action despite it. So my job is to be that catalyst for courageous action.
I think you're a little bit more than that. I think you're also an enabler in a good way. You know, in my opinion, if the heart rate is going, it's because you care. You know, you're a little bit nervous, you're a little bit uncomfortable, but you know, you do need the courage to, of course, you know, act on those emotions and act on those, you know, kind of feelings, and of course, have a little bit of a game plan. Always helps. Now, I would love to dive into your book, The Boss. You wrote that pressure corrupts, not power. Why is pressure such a hidden danger for all managers?
Well, I mean, let me ask you this, Donnie, if it's okay to ask you a question.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think you're under a lot of pressure right now?
I would say yes.
Yeah. And when you're not your best self under pressure, if you're willing to be honest, what do you do? Things that you're not proud of.
Oh, when I'm under pressure, I would say sometimes self-doubt. I would say sometimes, it's an instant reaction to sometimes get frustrated or anger. I would say the natural reaction.
Yes. And with that self-doubt, what comes with that? When you start to doubt yourself, how does that show up outwardly to other people?
Typically, maybe in different extreme emotions, maybe extreme reactions.
Yeah, exactly. So that is exactly what I mean by pressure corrupts. That is, we do not necessarily bring our best selves forward. We lose our temper. We may raise our voice. We may make comments that we regret later on. What we don't often realize is the effect that has on other people when we're managers. Worse, the harm that it might be creating. We might raise our voice and just think, oh, they're big boys and girls. They're gonna have to deal with this. We're in a high pressure environment. This is what they signed up for. This is what they get paid the big bucks for. But they're sitting there. It's ruined their week or their weekend because everything that comes from on high, power is like a broken volume knob. It gets amplified. People take it more personally because they're reliant on the person in a position of power for so much, from little things to what they get to do that day to their very jobs. So pressure corrupts our actions, and then power isolates us from the effect of those actions on other people.
There's a thing that resonated with me a long time ago in the Army, and it kind of, you made me think of it just now, that we learn much more from people we don't want to be than we do of the people we want to be, unfortunately.
Sometimes we do. Yes. And pressure is such a good thing if we know how to harness it, if we use some tool. And this is why I have so many concrete tools in the book, because if we can use those tools, we can we can harness the kind of pressure that turns coal into diamonds.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also mentioned a bit about power gaps and pressure pitfalls. Why are they career killers? Because I'm curious. So, those are very powerful statements. If you don't mind, maybe breaking those down a bit for the audience.
Absolutely. Let's break it down. So pressure pitfalls are the kinds of things, the pitfalls we fall into when we don't manage pressure mindfully. When you mentioned feeling insecure or self-doubt, a lot of times there's our own, what I call in the book, our inner hungers, our unmet hungers that show up. And when we show up to work hungry, we indulge in junk behavior, just like if we go to the grocery store hungry, we buy junk food. So and by hungry, I mean our hunger for affirmation, too much praise, wanting to please everybody, wanting to show up as smarter than anybody else, wanting to
Right.
remain relevant. These behaviors veer us off course from what it is we really need to achieve and how we hold other people accountable as managers. So these pressure pitfalls come into play and divert us from remaining strategic. Another pressure pitfall, for example, is that of what I call the sole provider, SOLE, as in jumping in thinking I'm the only one who can do this better, faster than anybody else, or I just simply get excited about crossing things off my to-do list. I'm the kind of person who might finish a item and then put it on the list just so I can cross it, or I might go caretake my employees by saying, oh, they're very busy. Oh, I'm just trying to be helpful. Now, there's nothing wrong with these intentions, but when they're overdone, we become the sole provider. We take on all this pressure on ourselves, and we let other people off the hook.
Yeah.
Not only do we let them off the hook, they never grow and develop. They don't learn. It would be, imagine if you were still pushing the bicycle for your child when your child is no longer a child. That's what the sole provider is like. So those are a couple of pressure pitfalls, our unmet hungers and the sole provider. In terms of power gaps, power creates a distance. The minute power walks into a room, the dynamics of the room shift. And that's what I call a power gap. It's this gap where it makes it hard to see things clearly. And it creates miscommunication, misunderstanding. All kinds of problems start to show up. One of the most insidious power gaps is the gap that's created when we fall into what's called the singular story. The higher you go, the more successful you've been, you become more and more used to your own formula of doing things right. I've seen this before. I've done this before. Boom. Let's jump in with this quick assumption. This is how we're going to do it. Let's go. And of course, if you're the person in position of power, who's going to disagree with you? Who's going to come up with a whole different idea?
No one, of course.
No one, right? Because, I mean, they're smart. They don't want to get fired. And so this power gap allows that singular story to propagate. Now, maybe 90% of the time, that is the right story. But what if it's not? What if it's outdated? What if it's incomplete? And back to growing the capability of the team, what if somebody else really wanted to contribute and now doesn't have that opportunity?
Yeah, that's the biggest one to me that kind of resonated as what you shared is that, leadership is very difficult. Yeah, it is a balancing act. It is something that, something that worked today might not be the exact same answer for tomorrow. And I would say adaptability and humility, I think is, some great characteristics for leaders. I know as I've grown my career, from managing, I would say consultants and recruiters to now managing leaders, it is a very different skill set. Is
There.
the mind has it's of course been a challenge for me personally, but it is also very exciting to see other people leading the way that maybe they didn't think they could, or maybe doing some things that are a bit different, a bit unorthodox than what they've normally done, but still seeing the right wins. I'm curious, what do you feel about like flexibility, in leadership? And as far as, to me, I think a framework is very important. I think having, I would say a minimum list of 10 of things that have to be done or that make something look good. And then from there, the additional 10 things could potentially be customized to you, your leadership style, the way that you kind of operate with your teams. How do you feel that kind of scenario, given your extensive experience?
So when you say 10 things, are you talking about 10 work items that are priority one, or are you talking about ways in which you show up?
Exactly. So it'd be the latter. So essentially, it would be, let's say you envision a leader as these 10 things, or the leader
Yeah.
that you want to be as these 10 things. But,
Yeah.
potentially what you are versus what needs to be are sometimes a
Yes.
bit of a difference.
Oh,
And that
yeah.
that was my question.
What a great question, Donnie. I think you're really putting your finger on something super important, which is how do I look, if I have to completely reinvent myself, every single person I talk to, I'm going to talk about pressure, be crushed under the pressure of that. At the same time, if I show up exactly the same way in every situation, that's not so good either. This
Actually,
is one of exactly. So this is one of the 4 leadership myths I bust in the first chapter of the book, which is that authenticity is not singular. It should not exist in its singular form. Because, okay, which is the authentic Donnie? The podcast host, the supervisor, the partner at home, the child to your parents, the parent to your
the father as well. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, right?
And
So exactly. So of course there's a core set of things and a core set of values that undergird all of those things and how you show up. But then there's differences in each of them. So flexibility is supremely important. And to meet your audience, we all talk about that, right? And it's no different when you're managing people. For example, I had somebody on my team who was fantastic in front of an audience on a public stage. And he came to me and he said, Sabina, never give me kudos or acknowledge me publicly. If
interesting.
you do, it will backfire. It will have the opposite effect of feeling like a reward.
Oh, wow.
Now, I would never have guessed that about this guy.
Of course, yeah, that's what my
Knowing
thought was as well.
right, right. It's very surprising. So you have to temper how you treat other people and how you show up to other people. There is a tool called a mapping tool in my book, which speaks to this very question that you've asked, Donnie. And this is like um, it's if you're writing code, it's like the comments in your code.
Oh, yeah, some of the
So
syntax.
yeah, so for example, I might explain some of my nonverbal communication. I might say, when I'm frowning, that's actually my thinking face. It doesn't mean I don't like what you're saying. It actually means you've given me really great fodder for thought. And I tend to have a serious look on my face. Or you might cue them about different times of day. I am not a morning person, so don't schedule meetings before 10 a.m. with me. You might give them some cues about communication. I prefer short texts, or I prefer Teams chat over email, or I prefer one email with all the issues that have come up in the day. Give them some breadcrumbs and help them decode, help them understand what your code means. Because then they know what are some of your default settings.
Mhm.
And then you, of course, adapt and adopt based on who you're talking with.
Yeah, I can only imagine. But there's one thing that's very key and crucial in everything that you've shared, and it's the ability to ask questions. You cannot make assumptions in these types of scenarios because assumptions are the killer of everything, in my experience.
You
But you have to be, I guess, be comfortable in your own skin enough, or to really just put everything out there. I noticed this. This is kind of how I see this, but is this the actual depiction of
yeah.
what is really happening? Especially when you said with the face example, that was a very good one for me.
Yeah, exactly. So make it so. And as employees, when we're managing up, we constantly misinterpret the boss's body language because, again, it comes across more amplified than it is. It comes across more personal than it is. So you're exactly right asking those questions. Here's another thing you could do. Instead of making one assumption, singular story, you make 3 or 4 assumptions. Oh, the reason he's frowning is because he really doesn't like me. The reason he's frowning is he's ready to fire me. Or the reason he's frowning is he's not a morning person. Or the reason he's frowning is he had to drop off his surly teenager to school right before coming here. As soon as I make those multiple assumptions, it releases the grip in my brain of, oh my gosh, threat, danger, to let me lean in. Now that I've allowed my brain that space to get out of that primitive threat response, I can lean in with more curiosity and ask questions.
Very true. I almost second guess myself when I have a negative knee-jerk reaction. I'm like, but
Yeah.
is that really the case? And I kind of
Yes.
personalize it myself, where
Yes.
it's like, I have a strong face, it's not when I'm thinking, I might look angry. You said that, and that's why it really resonated with me a bit. Because the more I think, the more I'm just inside of my head, and my face just doesn't move apparently.
Yeah.
So I'm like, Donnie, this person might be like you, has a strong face, actually isn't that, unhappy about anything.
Right.
But you just gotta ask, how's everything? To me, it's just, assumption. Okay, all right. If I'm assuming something, maybe I should ask something. It's almost like a reaction to my thought process.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Could there be something else going on? Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also mentioned in your book about the yes list and how it helps leaders manage focus and energy. Now, I'm
Yes.
excited about this one because, as I'm sure you're aware of now, energy is not a problem. But I think, matching the energy and the focus has always been something I've worked quite hard on. So I'm taking notes, I promise.
Well, so you want me to explain more about the yes
Yes,
list?
please. Yes, please.
Yeah. um, the yes list is paired with something called micro habits, Donnie. Micro
Mhm.
habits are 2
I'm a
words, micro
firm believer. Yeah, I'm a firm
and
believer in
habit.
micro habits.
Yeah. So it's really, really tiny things done daily.
Mm.
Let's say that somebody is focused on self-care, because when they take care of themselves, they're going to be able to take care of others better. So let's say they want to have a better fitness regimen, and they tell you, I'm going to work out 30 minutes every day starting tomorrow. And they're not working out at all right now. Yeah, you're smiling. Not going to happen. We just know it's not going to happen. And this is why most people have even stopped making New Year's resolutions, let alone keeping, right? So we go, okay, can you go smaller? Half that, 15 minutes. Okay, half that, 7.5 minutes, half that. So until you get to 1 push-up. And then people have this laugh, and you've reached the right it's micro at that point, because they think it's so ridiculously small. Of course I can do 1 push-up. Great. Can I do 5? You can, but you're going to get credit for 1. Okay. And it's something so small that you're going to do it every day. Why? Because that success is going to build on success. Now, your yes list, you capture 2 or 3 micro habits that you're going to do at the moment. Let's say there's one push-up every day, and perhaps you're learning to listen better. So you're going to paraphrase once a day. And that's also, so you have this table with days of the week and these 2 micro habits, and you put a yes or a no at the end of every day. It's that simple. It takes 20 seconds to do. And as a reminder, you could say, I'm going to populate my yes list when I'm brushing my teeth at night. And the reason to do this, why this helps you with focus, is we know what gets measured gets done. This idea occurred to me when I read once that people who go on diets, often diets, not only do they not work, but they tend to make you gain further weight after the fact. But the thing that works well is people who record and write what they eat. Now, that's a very long, cumbersome process. But
Accountability.
list is a 20-second way to do that.
Oh, I love it. Well, to me, ease is the I guess the driver of making things actually happen.
Perfect.
It's just digestible bites. We have big goals, as people and as businesses, but it is the backwards planning that to me is the most important because that's how we actually take that first step. get to 2, then to 3, and then eventually get to step maybe 100 at the end of where we're celebrating and, accomplishing. But sometimes goals and, I guess things that people want either personally or professionally just seem so out of reach. And
Yes.
just so far away that I think it's, we're natural, we're human beings, but I think like we get in our own way, with just one foot in front of the other. It's that simple, but also that difficult.
Yes, it is. And this is why breaking it into really, really achievable chunks. I have a personal story. I just finished my first marathon in
Oh,
my
congratulations.
life. Thank you. And it was not even on my radar 3 years ago, but I decided I wanted to start running more. And so I only added 0.1 miles, a tenth of a mile. And I stuck with that increment for 3 weeks at a time. And then, of course, over time, I increased that increment. But that was my micro habit. I couldn't even run a mile 3 years ago. And here I am at 26 miles.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I run for survival. So one day I would like to run a marathon, but I don't know if I don't know if that's on my to-do list, but an absolutely amazing feat. And I'm a bit jealous as well because that's something I've always thought about, but maybe I just need to start with my 0.1 and build my way up from there. Oh
That's
my God.
exactly it, Donnie. If I can
That's
do it, you can do it.
amazing. Hey, I love it. I love it. And, I love, leadership is something I'm quite passionate about because I'm always trying to be, the best leader that I can be. I have a few questions maybe around leadership, if you don't mind. What do great leaders do differently when they move from individual contributors into executive ones?
Okay, so that first jump into a manager.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. That's getting promoted, most people don't realize, is often the riskiest point in your career because you haven't changed, but your position has changed. And the people who are most successful in making that transition recognize that. They recognize that their strengths that got them promoted there are going to be viewed very differently from the next that are craning up now. Let's break this down to a couple of examples. And again, actually, if you would, what would be one or two of your superpowers, Donnie? What are a couple of your strengths?
I think I'm an enabler. I think I'm a motivator. And I would say I'm a pretty good. I really care about my staff. I'm very passionate about taking care of people.
You're passionate about taking care of people. Okay, so let's build on that last one. And I'm sure this doesn't happen to you, but I'm going to build on it as an
Oh yeah,
example.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm game.
Yeah, so let's say there is somebody whose strength is taking care of people, lots of empathy, deep listening, being fully present with their people, deeply, deeply caring. They get promoted. So this was, let's say they were doing this as a colleague, as a peer as well. Now they get promoted and they're deeply caring. That's great. And for some people reporting up to this person, it might look like this person's not holding everyone accountable. This person's playing favorites. That person on the team is a slacker, and this person cares so much about them or knows about their family situation that they're not holding them accountable. They're not being as firm as they need to. So suddenly, this caring, this empathy, these wonderful traits that make for really successful managers is being looked at in a whole different dimension. Those managers who made that jump successfully recognize that. So this does not, let me be very clear, this does not mean stop caring or stop being empathetic. It means recognizing that it might look different from a different perspective and setting the appropriate expectations. I deeply care about each person on this team, and I'm going to continue to do that. When you talk to me, I can assure you of my full attention. If at any point I'm not listening, I will ask for a timeout so that I can take care of whatever's distracting me so I can be fully present. And I deeply care about each of your business results so that you can be successful in the long term, not just today and tomorrow, but in your career. That means along with that care will come some direct feedback. Right?
Absolutely.
So now You've created space for care. You framed it all as care. But everybody hears how this has shifted now that you've gone into the role of manager. Does that make sense?
It resonated a lot actually. So I went from leading a team of about 4 or 5 to about 30.
Oh,
So
wow.
which
Yeah, that's a big jump.
yeah, so it's a very big jump, but also, my boss is on the other side of the world in Rio, but from Europe. So everybody sees things very differently, depending on
Yes,
where you're from in the
right.
world.
Truly.
Sometimes my niceness, my smile, my energy, sometimes comes across as I'm trying to be everyone's friend. So one of the
Yeah.
things I challenged myself to be was tie in that personality or that personal touch with the business. Not
Yes.
only, what's happening
Yes.
outside, but what do you want to accomplish out of your life? What are your goals? And
Yes.
using those kind of personal bits, because I can't help who I am. I'm a father. I really embody that.
Yes.
But you can also turn into ROI. Okay, you want a trip. You want to take care of your family. You want a car, for example. Those are what my teams want. And okay, so how do we drive that for the business? How do we drive that? And remember, this is because we're trying to accomplish this goal together. I really want you to go on this trip and enjoy this time with family, but we also, have a job to do and trying to, I would say, infuse the two.
Yes.
Some days are great days. Some days, always wish you would have done some things a little bit differently, but for the most part, I think that has really helped for me in particular with that kind of transition, because you're absolutely right. You got to think much bigger. And I think that's the biggest thing when stepping into leadership. You don't realize that all eyes are on you, the visibility, and everybody has different points of view, I think is a good word to use, of, what you're doing and essentially what perspective you're coming from.
Donnie, you are so wise, and you're right. No one is perfect. So those days where you're particularly under extra pressure and you raise your voice, so you get snippy, people are going to go, "That's caring." Yeah, because there are no purely good or bad bosses. They reside all within us. And that's where we need to manage that pressure to show up that way. I love your point too about really just always tying it to that bigger purpose. This is where we're headed. This is why we're doing what we're doing. Yeah.
For me, it worked, and it so happened that it worked, as well. As I'm leading and adding to the team and just growing this big function for Airswift.
Yeah.
But it's also, very much about asking yourself a lot of questions and just asking for feedback. Just seeing, even if it's bad, just take it with a pinch of salt and take it as an opportunity to be better. But that's why I said in the beginning, humility and just being able to ask questions as a leader, I feel is very, very crucial, no matter at
So,
what level.
so important. Yeah.
So how do you coach leaders to scale themselves? Now you mentioned, you're, speaking with, especially on one-to-one, as you mentioned now, with some very senior individuals, and they've done things maybe traditionally for a long time and seen a lot of different, especially say, for example, with 20 or 30 years of experience, the last 20 or 30 years has been very different. A lot of new advances. And yeah, this has been quite a crazy time to be a leader. How do you, help them scale themselves, especially, and I would say, fast growth and high paced environments?
What a great question. We are seeing this particularly being vitally important in this age of AI and in the age of where middle management layers are being thinned. So if you use the same principles you use to manage people now, it's just not even humanly possible, let alone the incredible amounts of pressure you're going to add to your plate. The first thing I affectionately tell people to do is to shut up as a way to scale. Here's what that means. You're in a meeting. If you show up and are the first person to share ideas, no one else is going to share ideas. Then you're going to think, oh, see, if I don't come up with ideas, no one else does. So then you throw in more ideas and more ideas, and no one's going to argue or debate with it. And then one of those doesn't work well, and you go, why didn't you all tell me that? Well, because you took up all the oxygen right from the get go. So exercising your shut up muscle, it has 4 steps in my book. A couple of those. One is, when it comes to idea generation, be the third or the fourth person to speak, never the first. And the other is, one thing that gets in the way of our listening are our own ideas. So what if you started taking notes in the margin? Okay, I'm going to write this down. Okay, I'm going to write that down. And then when you're the third, fourth person to speak, or even the last person to speak, you can check against those notes to see what somebody else has already brought up. So you can just bring up the things that are unique to your contribution. That has the added benefit of everyone leaving the meeting feeling smart versus it just being your show. So if you want to grow other people, if you want them to bring in ideas, so you're not carrying that whole burden yourself and allowing yourself and others to scale up, shut up.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And most importantly, I think you're only as successful as the people around you. And it's almost like I know you're growing your career, but you're almost trying to bring everybody up with you in that
Yeah,
sense. And I
right.
think, just pushing them, also be like, okay, I know what to do this, but asking, how would you attack this? Because
Yeah,
I have found that when I ask that, sometimes I learn some things of the people, kind of do things
for
very
sure.
differently or think very differently than I do when they attacked a particular role or hard search and recruitment. And then I'm like, okay, I learned something great, but it's also giving the feedback of saying, I just learned something from you. For you as a boss to say that, I think
Yeah,
really opens up that relationship and that open lines of communication, because I've said it to some people and their face have almost been like in shock, like what just happened kind of, scenario. But I'm just like, you just taught me something just now and I really appreciate that. And then they'll just be like, they don't say anything, but I hope that it makes, it adds the value of, as far as, what they bring to the table in our organization.
exactly. Exactly. Donnie, I'm waiting now for your book on management. You've got so many very concrete ways in which you've embodied this. It creates great psychological safety when you do that as well.
I hope so. Like I said, I care, and I try to use that as a sword or as a shield. I don't think caring is a bad thing. I don't think caring is something that needs to be looked down upon. Some people think a leader just has to be so stern, so rigid, so stiff, as I like to describe them. But I feel it's the complete opposite. I feel like the people that are more flexible, the more malleable, and most
Yeah,
important, the people that care are the people that really have people that stick with them forever, especially
yeah,
in a day and age where people can jump ship so easy. They can use their phone to find a new role. People can move and they can, be keyboard warriors. We discussed, your book and, giving you some amazing feedback on your book, but, people can just jump online, and just say anything they want now. It's a very interesting, culture that we live in, as far as, accessibility.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Now, one of my favorite topics is something I really want to ask you about, is especially, about burnout and, boosting performance. How do you think organizations could do a better job, or even just support their managers and prevent things like this?
One of the things to support, so often I say, when under pressure, do nothing.
Mm.
So for power, say nothing. When under pressure, do nothing. This means taking 2 hours a week back to back, and organizations could make this a practice. And some of my client organizations have done that, to do what's called blank space. Blank space is where during the work week, you unplug. You're not reading, you're not talking to anybody, you're not doing work, you're not catching up on your to do list. It's just space to pull back and think. Research shows our best ideas come when? In the shower, on our commute, during exercising. In other words, when we give this active part of our brain some blank space, the thoughts then are hiding in plain sight. And we're putting so much pressure on ourselves. In your case, Donnie, when you talk about self doubt creeping in, those tendrils of self doubt can be vanquished when you have some space and suddenly, aha, bing, bing,
Mm.
idea this, idea that, solution this. Ooh, now it seems so obvious once you give yourself that time. So you are sufficient. You have the answers. Just step back and give yourself that blank space. And organizations supporting that becomes really helpful. Some organizations also do things like Fridays are meeting free days, or such and half a day here is an email free day, or so on and so forth. So any way to create blank space gives you the ability to leapfrog the current ways of thinking.
It's very much tied into, excuse me, something I try to practice. The more, I guess, intense the situation, the more time I take to react to it.
Uh,
Let's I'm
Beautiful.
from the U.S. Army. I did 6 years in the U.S. Army. So, it was something I learned a long time ago, from that perspective, that was, okay, planning is very important. and you cannot take back a reaction or a first impression. The enemy, when I was in Iraq, essentially we would try to keep ourselves safe, but the first one was always the one that they wanted us to do. And I think that it followed me throughout life, and I use it in leadership as well, where, if it's a really intense situation, something is high pressure, something happens, something may ethical as well, that is when you take a step back. I go for walks. My brain is always going a million miles an hour. So I'll leave my office, I'll go downstairs, have my little loop that I kind of take, and I just think. Honestly, it's kind of the way I kind of depressurize my mind. But it's helped me, essentially kind of digest things and not make the wrong instant reaction, but also try to, not be too emotional in responses as well.
Listeners, do what Danny's just said he does. And if you find this daunting, so a lot of people find 2 hours daunting, make it into a micro habit. When somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answer, after you tell them you're going to get back to them after the meeting, take 30 seconds, just 30 seconds, and do a shorter loop. Go up and down the stairs once, just to give yourself that space and get in the habit of pausing.
Absolutely. And, Sabina, this has been so much fun. First and foremost, I really, really appreciate it. And I am very excited to purchase the book, You're the Boss, because, for me, it is all about trying to learn how other people do things and just being a sponge and, looking at, aspects like power gaps, pressure pitfalls, yes lists, time portfolios that you've mentioned today, and, seeing how I can, add those bits to my toolkit. Because not, and we're talking about leaders, but, just as people, I think the more people we have that, think about others, that try to be less reactionary, be more kind, be more compassionate, I really feel the world will be much better, let alone, employees and, company organizations. So I think something like this really has a huge ripple effect. And I am so excited that we were able to speak today, and I really thank you for your time. I would love any last bits or any comments from your side, because, this is exactly what, our listeners are wanting to hear. So I would let you finish things up for first.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Donnie. I, like you, have tremendously enjoyed this conversation because it's been a true dialogue with you as a manager in residence. Oh yeah, Sabina, that idea, here's what I do, or here's what I don't do, and I'm learning from it. So it's been great to do that. The book is available anywhere books are sold. And
Perfect.
If you do purchase the book, you can go to my website, sabinanawaz.com, and download some free templates and tools that accompany the book. And last few words I would say is going back to pressure, not power corrupts. Every action has a reaction. So as a manager, are you aware of the reactions your actions have? How might you design 1 or 2 questions to get quality feedback from your team about the true reaction of your actions?
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sabina, for your time and your knowledge. And we look forward to future episodes. I think we might have a little bit of a series on our hands, my friend.
You bet. I'm all in. Thank you, Donnie.
Thank you for listening to the STEM Career Coach with Donnie Maclary. If you enjoyed today's episode, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more inspiring stories and actionable tips. Catch you next time.